Imagine a majestic lion strolling through the wilderness, only to find a small, abandoned boy crying on the side of the road. What would a wild animal do? Attack? Walk away? What happens next is truly beyond belief. This is the story of an extraordinary bond that defies nature and expectations, a tale of courage, kindness, and a friendship that will warm your heart. Stay tuned as we unravel the unbelievable journey of a lion whose quest to rescue his daughter has traveled into so many different locales. Able to relate. All that we want more is to follow our genuine heart. This tale tells you where every moment will leave you on the edge of your seat. Dawn was breaking over the wildlife reserve, casting a soft golden light across the dusty roads and scattered bushes. The peaceful silence was broken by a faint, sorrowful sound. A child's trembling cries carried through the early morning air. Not far away, a majestic lion with a deep golden mane lifted his head, his sharp senses catching the unfamiliar sound. Once abandoned himself, this lion had grown into a lone king of the reserve, weathered yet strong. His amber eyes scanned the empty path, narrowing as they located the source. A small boy, no more than 3 years old, sitting alone in the middle of the wilderness. The boy's face was tear-streaked and flushed from hours of crying. His tiny frame was wrapped in an oversized blue jacket that looked far too big for him, and his shivering hands clutched at his knees, as if trying to make himself smaller. Suddenly, his wide, frightened eyes locked onto the figure approaching him, the lion. The mighty creature rose to his full height, his muscles rippling as he strode forward cautiously, his massive paws moving silently across the ground. Though feared by all, his steps reflected curiosity more than aggression. The child froze, his cries reduced to quiet whimpers as the lion closed the distance. Just as the lion reached him, another shadow appeared. A second lion, this one darker, and with a fiercer disposition, emerging from the bushes with a low, menacing growl. The child froze, his milder eyes flitting left and right, never facing the lion itself. The lion stepped closer. Kalen's heart skidded to a halt. Was it right? Unbelievable fear shot. The small boy gasped, his innocent face caught between terror and awe. The two lions stood still for a moment, their eyes locked in an unspoken challenge. The golden-maned lion immediately stepped between the boy and the darker intruder, standing protectively in front of the child. A low growl rumbled in the golden lion's chest, a warning to his rival. The darker lion crouched low, muscles tense, and with a roar, lunged toward the golden lion. In a flash of claws and teeth, the two lions collided, their snarls echoing through the silent reserve. The golden lion twisted skillfully, dodging the darker lion's swipes, and countering with precision. Dust rose in clouds as they circled each other, two kings vying for dominance in a battle that could only end one way. The boy sat frozen, his tiny hands pressed to his cheeks as the fierce duel played out before him. Finally, the golden lion delivered a decisive blow, striking the darker lion's ribs and forcing him to stumble back. With a defeated roar, the darker lion retreated into the underbrush, disappearing into the wilderness. The golden-maned lion turned back to the boy, his breathing heavy but his stance calm. The boy stared up at him with wide, astonished eyes. The lion lowered himself to the ground a few feet away, his massive frame at rest, but his golden gaze fixed protectively on the child. Somehow the boy sensed that this creature, so feared by many, was not a threat, but a protector. For a long time the two sat together in silence, the boy's tears drying, and his fear slowly melting away. The lion remained watchful, his calm demeanor reassuring the child that he was no longer alone. The early morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the dirt paths of the wildlife reserve. Charlie, a young and rugged park ranger, was just finishing his morning patrol when a crackling call broke through his radio. Child spotted near the east perimeter, possibly abandoned, scanned back toward him. Gentlemen, will soon? Scant. Just Charlie's heart skipped a beat. Children were never supposed to be this deep in the reserve. It was far too dangerous. Revving his jeep, he sped toward the coordinates, the narrow path twisting under his wheels. When he arrived, Charlie's foot hit the brake hard, his eyes widening in disbelief. There, sitting in the middle of the road, was a small boy, calm but dusty, clutching a tuft of grass. And only a few feet away lay the golden-maned lion, a massive, regal creature Charlie instantly recognized. He had raised the lion himself as a cub years ago, after rescuing him from poachers, before releasing him back into the wild. The lion, they shared a bond that time hadn't broken. "Hey there, big guy," Charlie whispered softly as he stepped out of his jeep, his voice calm and measured. The lion's ears twitched, but he didn't move. His golden eyes remained fixed on the child. Charlie approached slowly, kneeling to the boy's level. "Hey, buddy. My name's Charlie. Are you okay?" The boy didn't speak, but his eyes softened, and after a long pause, he placed his small hand into Charlie's outstretched palm. Charlie smiled warmly, gently scooping the child into his arms. The golden lion rose to his feet, stretching as if his job was done. He stared at Charlie for a long moment, before turning and padding back into the wild, disappearing into the tall grass. "Thank you, old friend," Charlie murmured, watching him go. Carrying the boy to his jeep, Charlie offered him a canteen of water. "You're safe now," he reassured softly as the boy sipped, his hands shaking slightly. There was something remarkable about the child's calmness, something Charlie couldn't quite explain. As they drove back to the ranger station, Charlie's mind raced with questions. Who left this boy here? Why abandon him in such a dangerous place? But when he glanced back at the boy's face, he couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Back at the station, Charlie settled the boy on a small blanket, offering him a snack. "Can you tell me your name, buddy?" he asked gently. After a long pause, the boy whispered, "Billy." "That's a good name," Charlie replied with a smile, though his heart ached for the boy's situation. Tom burst into tears. Leaving Billy to rest, Charlie moved to the security room and rewound the reserve's perimeter camera footage. What he saw made his breath catch. A battered car stopping near the fence line. A woman stepped out, holding Billy tightly in her arms. Her face was pale with worry, her hands trembling as she lifted him over the fence. She kissed his forehead one last time, wiped her eyes, and hurried back to the car. Charlie stared at the screen, his mind reeling. Who was she? Why did she leave him here? And returning to Billy, Charlie knelt beside him again, his tone soft. Billy's face fell, his small shoulders trembling, as tears welled in his eyes. "Mama?" he whispered. She nodded. Charlie's chest tightened as he gently placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'll find out what happened," he promised silently. "And I'll make sure you're safe." As Billy's small eyes drifted shut, exhausted from the day's events, Charlie sat beside him, determined to uncover the truth. Somewhere, a family's story was waiting to be revealed. A story of pain, hope, and perhaps redemption. And it all began with an unbelievable bond between a lion and a lost boy. As evening settled over the wildlife reserve, Charlie moved quietly through the office, careful not to disturb Billy, who had finally drifted into a peaceful sleep. The events of the day weighed heavily on Charlie's mind. The child's abandonment, the mother's tearful farewell captured on security footage, and the strange encounter with the boy. Each piece of the puzzle deepened his growing sense of responsibility for the boy. Charlie gently closed the door to the small room where Billy lay wrapped in a blanket on a cot. The boy's small chest rose and fell steadily, the tension that had lined his young face melting away in sleep. A surge of protectiveness washed over Charlie as he watched over him. This was no ordinary day at the reserve, and this boy was no ordinary visitor. The next morning, Charlie prepared a modest breakfast and set it out on the small table. He heard the soft sound of tiny footsteps approaching, and looked up to see Billy standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. A smile spread across Charlie's face as he waved the boy over. "Everything is wonderful, thank you," he said, waving his hand, and then repeated it. "Good morning, Billy. Did you sleep well?" Billy nodded sleepily and shuffled toward the table. Charlie poured him a small glass of juice and gestured to the food. "Eat up. You're going to need your energy today," he said. Keeping his tone light and friendly, Billy hesitated for a moment, his eyes flickering up at Charlie, searching for something unspoken. "Thank you," he whispered softly, before beginning to eat. Charlie watched him, noticing the cautious way Billy held himself. Despite the fear and sadness lingering in his gaze, the boy seemed to be slowly adapting, letting his guard down, bit by bit. After breakfast, Charlie decided to show Billy more of the reserve, hoping to ease his mind. Together, they ventured outside, with Charlie pointing out animals from a safe distance. Billy's eyes lit up at the sight of deer grazing nearby, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, as birds swooped gracefully across the sky. Charlie found himself captivated by the boy's joy. It was as though Billy were seeing the world for the first time. After a while, Charlie found himself wondering if the boy had happened better than Charlie had done. Billy's eyes lit up at the sight of the bushes around him, as they passed the canyon overlooking the river near the gallery. After breakfast, Charlie found himself captivated by the sound of a horned hoof. 8 reds tilted in the blue sky, billowing the blue sky. They walked until they reached a clearing, where the golden-maned lion was resting beneath a large tree, its body stretched out in the warmth of the morning sun. Billy's steps faltered, but instead of retreating, he stood still, transfixed by the lion's majestic presence. Charlie knelt beside him and spoke softly. "That's our friend from yesterday. He helped keep you safe." Billy looked up at Charlie, awe flickering in his eyes. "He's big," he whispered, his voice a mix of fear and fascination. Charlie nodded, watching the lion with respect. "Yes, he is, but he's also strong and protective. He's a bit like you and me, Billy. We're all just trying to take care of each other." They stood together for a long moment, the morning air heavy with quiet understanding. The lion opened one eye lazily, glancing their way, as if acknowledging their presence, before resting once more. To Charlie, it was a reassuring gesture, as though the lion somehow understood they meant no harm. Charlie rested a gentle hand on Billy's shoulder and guided him away from the clearing to allow the lion to rest. As they continued their walk, Billy grew more talkative, asking occasional questions about the animals and the reserve. Charlie answered each one patiently, sensing a bond beginning to blossom between them. It felt as though Billy was starting to trust him, and that trust Charlie knew he had to honor. When they returned to the station, Charlie pulled out a sketchbook he often used to document observations of the animals. Flipping to a blank page, he handed Billy a pencil. "Why don't you draw something you liked from today?" Billy hesitated, looking up uncertainly before nodding and setting to work. With surprising focus, he began sketching the lion, capturing its majesty with an impressive level of detail for a child his age. Charlie watched him, a smile tugging at his lips, as Billy stuck out the tip of his tongue in concentration. "You're really good at that," Charlie praised. "The lion looks just like the real one." Billy's face lit up with a shy smile, a hint of pride shining in his eyes. "I like him. He's brave," he murmured, almost to himself. Charlie nodded, his voice gentle. "You know, Billy, it takes bravery to face things that scare you. I think you're very brave, too." Jeremy said nothing, not even a mutter, just tilted his head. The column continued eating. They were keeping pretty low. Charlie nodded. "You know, Billy, it takes bravery to face things. That's scary." Billy paused, his small fingers stilling as he looked up at Charlie. For a moment, the boy's guard dropped completely, and Charlie saw the vulnerability and resilience that lay beneath his quiet exterior. It was in that instant, Charlie realized he was no longer just caring for a child. He was beginning to truly care about Billy's bearings. As dusk fell over the reserve, Charlie made them a simple dinner. They ate together in a comfortable silence, a rare but welcome peace settling over the station. Later, when the stars began to dot the night sky, Charlie tucked Billy into the cot, pulling the blanket snugly around his small shoulders. He felt as though, even asleep, Billy blinked sleepily. "Will the lion come back?" he murmured. Charlie brushed a stray lock of hair from Billy's forehead. "Maybe. He's always nearby, watching out for us. And I'll be here too." "Okay," Billy nodded with a soft sigh, his eyelids growing heavy as he drifted into sleep. Charlie lingered for a moment, watching the boy's peaceful face. The quiet of the night wrapped around them like a protective cloak, and for the first time in a long while, Charlie felt a strange sense of completeness, as though fate had drawn the two of them together for a reason he couldn't yet understand. Stepping outside, Charlie let the cool night air wash over him. In the distance, silhouetted beneath the pale glow of the moon, he saw the golden-maned lion resting on a ridge overlooking the station. The lion's silent presence felt like an unspoken promise, a guardian watching over them both. Stepping outside, Charlie let the early day wash over him. Charlie took a deep breath, a calm resolve settling within him. He was no longer just a ranger tasked with protecting animals. Now, he was a guardian of something far more precious. A young boy who had found his way into his heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Charlie knew he would face them with the same courage and strength he had seen in the lion. Soft light filtered through the reserve station windows, casting a gentle glow over the small room where Billy still slept soundly. Charlie sat quietly at the table, a mug of coffee cradled in his hands, as his gaze drifted outside. His mind raced with thoughts of the past few days. The note from Billy's mother had changed everything. It wasn't random abandonment. It was a desperate act of love to keep her son safe. Now, Charlie felt a responsibility unlike anything he'd ever known. Outside, the lion lay near the edge of the reserve, his golden mane catching the morning light. He had become a silent guardian, watching over the station and its new inhabitants. Charlie felt an unspoken connection to the animal, as though they shared a common purpose, protecting Billy. Somehow, the lion's presence reassured him. They were in this together. Billy stirred, breaking Charlie's thoughts. The boy rubbed his eyes and padded over to the table, climbing onto the chair beside him. "Good morning," he murmured sleepily, his small voice barely a whisper. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Charlie smiled softly. "Morning, buddy. Did you sleep well?" Billy nodded, his gaze shifting to the window, where the wilderness stretched endlessly beyond. "Will my mom come back for me?" he asked suddenly, his tone innocent, yet heavy with longing. Charlie hesitated, the weight of the question settling in his chest. He searched for the right words that wouldn't break the boy's spirit. The second said, "Your mom did something very brave," Charlie said gently. "She wanted to make sure you were safe, and she knew this was the best place for you right now." Billy frowned in thought, his small brow furrowing as he processed what Charlie had said. Finally, he looked up, trust and uncertainty mingling in his wide eyes. "So, will you take care of me?" The question pierced straight through Charlie, catching him off guard. A wave of emotion rose within him, a fierce protectiveness, and the quiet fear of responsibility. But as he met Billy's gaze, he realized the decision had already been made, deep in his heart. There was no turning back. "Yes, Billy," Charlie said, his voice steady and filled with resolve. "I'll take care of you. I'll keep you safe." Billy's face lit up, a flicker of relief softening his expression. Without warning, he leaned forward, wrapping his arms around Charlie in a quick, spontaneous hug. The gesture caught Charlie by surprise, but he returned it, his hand gently resting on the boy's back. In that moment, any doubts he'd felt vanished. He knew he was exactly where he needed to be. The rest of the day passed quietly. Charlie went about his duties at the reserve, keeping Billy close by his side. He showed the boy how to feed the smaller animals, explaining their role in the ecosystem. Billy listened intently, his curiosity and intelligence shining through as he asked questions. Watching him, Charlie felt a growing admiration for the boy's resilience. As the afternoon wore on, Charlie realized he needed to contact the authorities. He had to make them aware of his decision and the potential danger that might come with it. Sitting at the desk, he picked up the phone and dialed. The line rang for what felt like forever before an officer finally answered. "Sie, pasi acontesut. I told," he began. He paused, mumbled into his phone, and failed to form the words. Then put the phone down and went back to sleep. As the afternoon wore on, the line rang for what felt like forever before beginning to fall asleep. But it wasn't long before he noticed the text message from Kyle. "This is Charlie," he said, his voice firm but calm. "I'm calling about the boy, Billy. His mother left him here, and I believe it was for his safety. I'm going to take care of him. But I need you to understand. If she was in danger, someone might come looking for him. I want to make sure he stays safe." His hand slid down again. There was a pause on the other end before the officer replied, his tone carrying a hint of skepticism. "That's a big responsibility you're taking on, Charlie. If any family comes forward, we may have to involve child services." "I will." Charlie's jaw tightened, but his resolve didn't waver. "Understood. But until that happens, he stays here. I'm committed to keeping him safe." When the call ended, Charlie leaned back in his chair, a surge of determination filling him. He'd grown attached to Billy in such a short time, and he wouldn't let anyone take the boy away, unless it was what was best for him. His life had changed the moment Billy arrived, and he was ready to fight for the boy's safety and happiness. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Charlie took Billy on a short walk through the reserve. The golden light painted the landscape in hues of amber and rose. Billy walked beside him, occasionally stopping to touch a plant or watch a bird flit overhead. As they rounded a bend, they spotted the lion again, lying gracefully on a rock ledge that overlooked the area. Billy's face lit up, and he waved excitedly. The lion lifted his head, his golden eyes meeting Charlie's, with a quiet understanding. It was as though the great beast shared their unspoken bond, a mutual vow to protect the boy. "Do you think he knows?" Billy asked in a hushed voice, filled with wonder. Charlie knelt beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I think he does. I think he's here to help us, to keep us safe." Billy smiled, his small face full of trust. For a long moment, the three of them, man, boy, and lion, stood connected by an invisible thread, a shared sense of purpose that made the world feel whole. That night, Charlie tucked Billy into bed, reading him a story until his eyelids began to droop. As the boy drifted off, he murmured sleepily, "Good night, Charlie." Charlie leaned over and pulled the blanket snug around him. Stepping outside, Charlie let the cool night air fill his lungs. The reserve was quiet, bathed in moonlight. In the distance, beneath his usual tree, the lion lay, his golden mane a faint silhouette in the darkness. Charlie stared at him for a long time, gratitude swelling in his chest. The lion's calm presence felt like a promise, a vow to help him keep the boy safe. In that moment, Charlie knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Billy would face them together, supported by the silent strength of their guardian lion.